This is HBR News number 498. Pentagon to roll back SA rules, XXXY sides with men, where we discuss the news of the week and give it the Badger treatment. Hello everyone and welcome to Honey Badger Radio, because I hope you guys are doing well this week and that you're laughing at all of this absurdity so that you are not consumed by it. I'm your host, Brian, and I am joined by, as always, my lovely co-hosts, Hannah Wallen and Dr. Ranmercam. On today's HBR News show, we're going to be talking about some new developments regarding the protests on Tesla dealerships and such. The Pentagon speaks on due process issues facing military men, which is almost an exclusive story that nobody's talking about. And who is Nutella, and more. So stick around, it's going to be a good time. And be sure to join us afterwards for the patron-only show. So on this patron show, I have this article from The Telegraph that showed up in the interwebs from Zoe Strimple. And this came out in April 7th, I believe. And it is entitled, "Young White Men Do Have Problems, But They Need to Man Up. Yes, masculinity is crisis, but the truth is that masculinity has always been in crisis." So, you know, two wrongs equals a who cares.
I bet you if we look through this person's back catalogue, we'll find another article they did about how we shouldn't tell men to man up.
Yes.
because that's patriarchy or some shit.
Yeah, exactly. So, anyway, that should be a fun and totally not, blood pressure raising thing to read through. If you want to join us for that, you have to become a Badger yourself by going to feedthebadger.com /subscribe so that you can join us in our Discord server and enjoy all of the bonus content. And if you want to find where our content is archived, in case we were to be removed by a 3-letter agency or some such, then please go to badgerfeed.com or honeybadgerradio.com to find where all of our content lives. So with that out of the way, let us get into today's story. So first off, before I get into the stories I chose, let's look briefly at the ones I did not choose. So there's two that come to mind. Number one, 4chan, RIP in Pizzeria, RIP in Peace. 4chan apparently has been hacked and is down. I've never been there. I don't go there. I don't think it's bad necessarily, but I just it's not really my cup of tea. But in case people were wondering, 4chan is down. But that doesn't mean that 4chan won't be back. So
there will be revenge. This will be interesting. There will be.
Yes.
Well, it depends. I mean, if this had happened back in the day, there would have been some very
there was some shift in leadership at 4chan.
Oh, it's not just leadership.
It went woke or whatever, and now it's government. There's
it's more than that.
Glowies there.
Most of the there's most of the old fags are gone.
Yeah.
Nobody goes there anymore.
It's probably edgelords fucking with edgelords. It's just like Reddit. Yeah. It's just wokeoids fucking.
I wish that it happened to Reddit though. That would have been nice.
If you ever hung out on B-board very long, you saw that it was always that element was always there. Okay.
Yeah.
But it's not like it was. It's just not like it was. There's still some people there that are trying, but it's not.
Yeah, it's not the same.
Never been to Reddit either.
None of
the hacksaws have been hacksaws.
Websites are just impossible to navigate.
And the people that have that would have gotten. There still might be people there that would get revenge.
Mm-hmm.
But the people that really would have been scary, I think they're all gone.
Yep. So that was one story, and the other one that I didn't go with is women in space, because I think it's just mostly a nothing burger. As always, we celebrate mediocrity when women do it.
They should have sent pot-bellied pigs.
Yeah, right. So I didn't want to cover it because I didn't think there was enough meat on that bone. And aside from the fact that maybe by going out into space, Katy Perry learned something about what it means to be an astronaut, and maybe the fact that we just before that had brought back some astronauts that were trapped in orbit or stuck in orbit for a while. That might give them some perspective, but I didn't really want to make that one a big story. Like
There's a universe not far from here, a dimension not far from here, where something went hideously wrong on that flight, and the spacecraft got flung out into deep space, and those women became the first ever human beings whose bodies were not consumed back into Mother Earth. And if you believe souls, then they became the first souls ever to drift into space and die in unimaginable hell forever. Well, Elon Musk
There you go.
couldn't be bothered
Yeah.
bringing them back.
But it's not this universe, because in this universe, whenever women do something that has been traditionally considered horribly dangerous, you can pretty much figure out that they have added so many fail-safes to it that it's really not anymore.
Yeah. And well, they were barely out there very long at all. That's the thing. It was all just like press stuff. So, but
Yeah, it was
so
a
I
photo
didn't.
op.
Yeah, it was a photo op. Obviously, men were mostly behind. Like everything that made that possible was men. Women were just passengers, and they actually spent more time taking selfies than actually like enjoying where they were, which is crazy. But anyway, sorry, but it's true. But anyway, so I didn't cover those. But now let us get into the stories that I did choose to cover. So first, we're gonna jump into something kind of funny. Let's talk a little bit about Nutella. So, a New York woman who joined and actively recruited for the terrorist organization ISIS has been sentenced to 19 years in prison. Maya Caesar, whose war name is Nutella, which sounds like the answer to the question, what would you like on your toast, of which she appears to have had a lot, had just finished serving a 4-year term for the same crime.
This is a New York woman.
Yes.
She speaks English. She's presumably culturally American. She's familiar with Western brands.
Familiar with 9/11.
This is a pseudonym that she chose from all the possible syllables in any possible language. She chose Marmite.
Yeah.
Nutella's not just a general foodstuff; it's an actual brand, an internationally recognized one. You'd think she'd have run into legal problems with Ferrero, the Italian company that manufactures Nutella. Yes, I did research into this more than I usually do because this is so funny. Even if that was her real name, it would be legally problematic. If you officially named your child Peanut Buttercups, you'd probably get a cease and desist letter from Hershey's. This woman, as a terrorist, named herself after Nutella. Never mind the US government. She should have been stopped in her tracks long ago by Big Confection. Don't be telling me they don't have the power. Big Confection could kill several children and get away with it.
I think
they probably have already, allegedly. All right, sorry, carry on.
I think she ate Big Confection, actually.
Yeah, right. Let me finish the write-up. But anyway, while on supervised release, Caesar, Nutella, let's just call her that because I think it's better. It's more memorable. Nutella almost immediately went back to reestablishing ties with her ISIS contacts. During that time, the Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals overturned the previous judge's decision and sought a harsher sentence for Nutella. Upon hearing this, Nutella would remove her ankle monitor and attempt to flee to Russia. She was arrested days later while hiding out in New Mexico. Her attorney, Deirdre Van Dornum, sounds like a character out of a Bond movie, was disappointed with the verdict, stating, Miss Caesar's sentence demonstrates the utter failure of the federal criminal justice system, lacking the mental health and de-radicalization resources everyone, from the FBI to mental health experts, agrees she needs. The court resorted to incapacitating a traumatized young woman who has never hurt anyone but herself. End quote. Meanwhile, NYPD Commissioner Jessica Tisch has a much more favorable view of the trial's outcome, stating, and by the way, Jessica Tisch has been very light on crime in New York, which is why their situation is so bad right now. But she says, quote, this sentence is a fitting and meaningful outcome for a woman who assisted ISIS in recruiting, squandered the chance for redemption by exposing herself as cooperating with the U.S. government, and persisted in promoting extremist ideologies to potential new recruits online, end quote.
Yeah, so then the question then that her defense brings up was she a complete and utter failure at it? Because it says the defense said she never hurt anyone. Well, for that to be true, she would have had to fail to recruit anyone ever into ISIS, because if she successfully recruited so much as one person, she hurt that person. She persuaded that person to join a terrorist group that was going to exploit them as cannon fodder in an endless and really pointless war on the entire rest of the world. I mean, that's pretty harmful shit right there.
Yeah.
So, when it comes to the criminal justice system failing to deprogram cult mentalities, I guess we're pretty familiar with that, since the United States is still full of gangs. But and like, that part's probably true. She's probably right about that. But it's certainly not unique to women. Why is she complaining now?
Yeah. Well, she is getting, from what I can see, a lighter sentence than normal. She's sentenced to 19 years. After court tossed shockingly low punishment. So
Yeah.
they were initially trying to give her a much lighter punishment, and it went up to 19 years, which is,
See, my thinking on it though is it's just why is it suddenly a problem now that the court or that the system failed to rehabilitate the prisoner just because the
Mm-hmm.
prisoner is female?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And by the way, as an aside, her name, Nutella, translates to mother of Nutella. Woo! And by the way, like, people naming themselves after brands is not new. I think there's a lot of examples of rappers that do that.
Yeah.
Coachella, I think, is one. There's plenty. I'm sure the chat can throw some names of various musicians that have named themselves after brands. I don't know why they haven't been sued for whatever reason, but yeah. So Nutella is mother
And she
of
just doesn't strike
Nutella.
me as an Nutella. She strikes me more as an no.
Yeah, right. Like a yum Nutella, actually. Like, I'll take all of
No.
it.
So yeah, it's all sounding rather reminiscent of our very own Shamima Begum, who I'm proud to say is no longer our very own. Her current status goes by the enviable sounding description of stateless. Those of us who are generally displeased with the absolute state of the state might find it appealing to be stateless, like an actual sovereign citizen, and not actually being detained. But in practice, it's not as attractive as it sounds, especially in Shamima Begum's case, because she's currently in a detention camp in Syria, and no one is coming to save her. Nobody knows quite what's happening to her in there, but it's probably not good. I feel a little bit bad for her, but at the same time, she serves as a lesson, as a cautionary tale. Don't join ISIS. It's either an incredibly retarded thing to do or an incredibly malicious thing to do. And now that Hanlon's razor has been thoroughly debunked and discarded, we have to assume it's out of malice. Both in the case of Shamima Begum and indeed Grape Jam, or whatever her name is. I actually meant grape there. That wasn't me soft censoring the phrase rape jam, although that's probably exactly what Shamima Begum is currently in. Yes, I'm a bad person. But
Eminem is another example.
Yeah, there's another one.
Eminem.
He spelled it different, so he got away with it.
Oh, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, she just wrote Nutella. That's right. Yeah. Didn't even play around. Yes, I don't know.
For all my faults, I'm still not as bad as fucking Lady Marmalade over there. Don't give me that mental health bullshit. Lots of people have mental health problems, and it usually results in social awkwardness or substance abuse. It very rarely leads to high treason. Mental health or no mental health, you don't get to do that shit and act like you're not dangerous. So it's a shame she was caught in New Mexico. You should have let her escape to Russia, whereupon you could have revoked her US citizenship and She too could have become a stateless non-person who can be repeatedly graped in a third world underground torture garden in Russia. Again, I mean graped. The things Russians can do with bunches of grapes will make you wish it was just a penis. Those things can be quite thorny, especially when they've already become encrusted with various dried bodily fluids. Don't join ISIS, ladies. It's as simple as that. Just don't join ISIS. It's not like you can slip on a banana peel and fall over and accidentally join ISIS. It's very much a considered intellectual decision. So you're not that retarded. So just don't join ISIS. And if you do, enjoy your Darwin Award. You've earned it. I'm going to hell, and I will see you there.
All
I
right.
have a feeling if you did join ISIS, Russia wouldn't be a good place to flee to.
Yeah, it might not
saying.
be. Might not be. Well, let us know what you guys think about Nutella and this story in the comments. I thought it was funny, so I picked it, and I thought the image was so appropriate. But anyway, with that said, let's move on to the next story. So next we have a follow-up on the situation with these sort of protests, I guess you could say. So this group called the Civil Liberties Defense Center, which is an Oregon-based legal organization known for supporting far-left causes, including Antifa-linked activism in quotes, is actively training protesters targeting Tesla and its CEO, Elon Musk. The CLDC, founded by Lauren Regan to defend activists and challenge systemic inequality, has a history of representing environmental and social justice movements, which is like, okay, well, let's go after Tesla then, such as the Stop Cop City protests in Atlanta, which opposed a police training facility due to concerns over militarization and environmental impact. Recently, the CLDC has aligned with the Tesla Takedown campaign, a nationwide movement fueled by Musk's controversial labor policies and his political ties to President Donald Trump, particularly in following Musk's influential role in the administration after Trump's 2024 election victory. This role has sparked widespread backlash, with protests erupting across the U.S. from Seattle to Miami as part of the Tesla Takedown initiative, which has included both peaceful demonstrations and violent incidents like arson and vandalism at Tesla facilities. The CLDC has been providing virtual training and know your rights workshops, because they're like a legal, support firm or whatever, which is all about like how this is how you get away with, violence, property damage, theft, destruction, etc. Often in partnership with Indivisible, to guide activists. Indivisible, by the way, was getting USAID money, if I remember correctly, to guide activists
So does
on
this
protests.
organization.
What?
So does this organization.
Yeah, and this one, right? To guide activists on protest tactics while advising caution to avoid arrests in conservative areas. Despite the campaign's nonviolent stance, the article highlights growing tensions, urging Tesla owners and dealerships to stay vigilant as protests intensify. And I have a video here. It's an Instagram embed here that I'm going to play real quick. This is Lauren Regan. It's not very long, so we'll just give this a quick listen.
During time periods where the government and corporations are attempting to crack down on dissent or crack down on activism, if they believe that that tactic is working for them, then you're going to see them double down on that tactic, and it's only going to get more pronounced. As a lawyer, I also wanted to tell you that even during periods of heightened state repression, the total number of people who are actually targeted by that repression is quite low. They can't arrest us all, they can't target us all, and their goal is to just pluck a few individuals out and scare the rest of us into submission and apathy. It's time to be strategic and effective, but it's not time to be afraid or silenced.
There you go.
They never target the deep state, do they? They never target any of the various all-powerful.
They get paid by the deep state.
Of the state. Yeah, it's odd, isn't it? You think Antifa and other such anarcho-communist, flag-waving, ignorant geeks will be going after the deep state first and foremost. what with anarcho-communism being ostensibly opposed to the state, I realize most of them don't believe the deep state even exists. They think it's a conspiracy theory. They think it's a right-wing fantasy and part of the anti-Semitic point of no return, weirdly, whatever that has to do with it. But they know the state exists. They know the FBI and the CIA exist. And if you press them, they'll insist that the Trump administration is currently in charge of those agencies. If they were to strike at the most dangerous weapons of the aforementioned Trump administration, their first port of call would be such agencies. But they're not interested, just like they're not interested in tussling with any of those Patriot Front marches, the ones who are definitely not feds. It's almost as though, as Brian said, I mean, call us crazy, call us nutjobs, wrap our brains in 12 layers of tinfoil, but it's almost as though they're on the same side. And it's the left side. It's almost as though they're all being funded by the same gushing fountain of taxpayers' money. Having said that, they're not even going after ICE in terms of boots on the ground. They'll happily advise the general public on how to avoid ICE, from all the way from the lowest TikTok video all the way up to the squad themselves. But they don't send their own paid actors into the actual streets to actually fuck with ICE. Even though we can be reasonably sure that ICE is not funded by the left-wing money fountain. If it was up to the left, there would be no ICE. During Biden's term, there pretty much wasn't. The reason they're not fucking around with ICE is because they would find out. Same reason they wouldn't fuck around with the deep state even if they wanted to. Those niggas have a license to kill, or at least a license to grab you and throw you into a small room for a very long time. Tesla does not. Tesla is not a federal agency at all. They don't have a license to kill or kidnap anyone. They barely have the legal wherewithal to even retaliate. After all, as the left-wing shitsmiths like to remind us, no one elected Elon. He hasn't provided government security, nor are any of his companies. Thank fuck he can afford his own private security, or he'd be dead 7 times by now. Unfortunately, all the private security in the world cannot defend every Tesla in the world from an army of guerrilla terrorists, aided and abetted by the deep state. That's why they're going after Tesla, because they can. Not because it's a powerful agency with a government-assured monopoly of control, but because it isn't. It's what the Antifa thugs themselves would call punching down. It's government-sponsored terrorism against private companies. We have a word for this, ladies and gentlemen, and it is communism. They can tell themselves they're fighting against the richest man in the world, and they'll say it in total oblivious ignorance of the multi-trillion-dollar superpower, propping them up and pushing them forward. Cunts, ladies and gentlemen, big, fat, sweaty cunts who will stop at nothing to turn the whole world into one big, fat, sweaty cunt.
Ooh.
By any means necessary. So for anyone out there who owns a Tesla, I would suggest you fit it with some kind of turret gun that activates automatically by proximity to anyone else who tries to key it. And if that's illegal, well, shit, I thought this was America. Well, at least add a couple of empty turret guns on each side and a couple of robot legs for it to stand on while it faces you down and chants, please put down your weapon. You have 20 seconds to comply. You have 15 seconds to comply. And do record everything. I want to see their faces when it happens. Pardon. In summary, I've killed commies. Just kill them. Kill them dead. Allegedly, of course. Don't kill them.
In Minecraft.
Allegedly kill them. In Minecraft.
Chicken jockey.
Yeah.
I wonder how many young men this organization is going to get arrested after they've turned 18, when it's going to be on their record for the rest of their life for some dumb shit that's going to come back and haunt them 20 years later when they want to get promoted in some company and it comes up on their criminal record that they engaged in felony vandalism of private property when they were young, and then they have to explain it. But that's not really the worst of it. So I want you to think back to something that At first, it's going to seem completely unrelated. Everybody remember fucking Scum Girl from the
Yep.
Toronto protest, that and how she,
Fucking
showed her
scum!
terror, her absolute terror of men in general by getting right up in that guy's face
Mm-hmm.
and telling him, you are fucking scum, right? Like just getting an inch off of him and hissing in his face that he was fucking scum. Not not standing 20 feet away behind 20 cops and saying it, but just getting right in there. That type of provocation is targeted, and it is purposeful and deliberate. And this organization engages in that kind of stuff, right? The goal is to get people to respond to their vandalism and their violence and their wrongdoing to others with more violence. They're trying to start a civil war. And so, just a reminder, son, this is bait. Not the story, but the behavior. This is bait. And men all over the United States really should be very careful to avoid taking the bait. If someone shows up and attacks your car, call the cops. Don't
Mm-hmm.
don't fight back. Don't approach them. Film them from a distance. Let your car film them if your car has the equipment, which I think most, if not all, Teslas do. But don't engage. Do not engage, because this needs to be the only result that they need to experience from this is that it sends them to jail, directly to jail. No pass and go. No collecting $200. Just jail. And when that happens to enough of them, they'll stop doing this. If they try to escalate to something else, that's a different story. If they try coming into your house, obviously you don't really have much of a choice at that point. But all of this stuff that's going on is about trying to make you make a mistake. So now is the time to be the most stoic you've ever been in your entire life about this kind of shit. Everything
Yeah.
you own is just stuff. The most important things you have are your loved ones and your freedom. And you don't want to allow somebody to provoke you into doing something that justifies under the law some entity taking away either of those things from you.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the boys thing, because that is what I think is the way that these people essentially, like, run their operation. They use, you know, young men looking for some kind of purpose, cause, or mission.
Yep,
They recruit them. They use women to do it. That's why
very
that woman,
exploitative.
yeah, that's why the woman who leads this thing is talking about what people should be doing, when we know damn well she is not going to be out there putting anything at risk. She is asking men to do it, and it is men that will do it. And I brought this up many times. I believe it was Portland Antifa. One of the leaders there, and I don't know if she still does this, was a woman named Yvette Falarca, who is a teacher, and she is like the person that ran Antifa, at least in a certain part of Portland. She at least was running a chapter of it. And the men who work for her, the men who operate under her, many of them don't even really know what it is that they're doing. They just believe that they're doing the right thing. They're fighting fascism, and they're basically exploiting the male instinct to protect women in order to turn them into weapons. And this is not uncommon. Shout out to BX, who has been on the show a couple of times and talked about how men who are disenfranchised, they're struggling with their purpose in life. They've been demonized in the media and in education everywhere. They are separated from their father in some way. they're isolated socially, and they're looking for some place to belong to. They are often exploited by extremist groups, whether it's, like neo-Nazis or Klansmen or Islamist groups or whatever it is. And
Or
Antifa is one of
Antifa.
those groups. Yeah, or
Yeah.
Antifa or, radical leftist groups. And
Very
they're the
vulnerable.
ones that become, they're vulnerable. And they're also the ones that usually who are the ones that get their lives destroyed by that. So she's willing to
Mhm.
let these kids go to jail, to be harmed, maybe even be killed, in a fight, like, I don't know, by a person defending themselves, like a Kyle Rittenhouse. Like these are the ones that are going to be destroyed by this. And part of what I think, when we talk about like remaining stoic and not taking the bait, is like helping these men so they don't end up in a situation where they think they're doing the right thing for the right reason in some way, when really they're just looking to belong to something, and that's how they get used. So we have to like give them a reason to feel like they belong to something that isn't, inherently putting them at risk, either their future or their life or their livelihood. So yeah, that's just a quick mention. These people, they do want a war. They want a civil war, and I don't think this is like two sides pushing on something. I think there's one side that is essentially funded by the deep state, by these people who want to see, they're either accelerationists or they're radicals of some stripe, or they're afraid they're going to lose their money. Remember, these people, what they're fighting is basically to continue to get paid by the deep state. They're not really, they exist to agitate. And if they're not getting paid like whatever millions or billions of dollars they were getting from USAID or whatever other three-letter organizations, the CIA, then they have no, they're going to lose their pay pig, and they have to maintain that. So they're going to essentially say, "Oh, we're losing our democracy. Go fight so I can continue to get paid. Go die for me so I can continue to collect a paycheck, because I want you to do that. You're a man and you need to prove to me you're a man, because otherwise I'm going to think you're a piece of garbage like other men. So go die for me, and then I will put something nice on your tombstone maybe. And then I'll continue to get paid." And that's kind of like where all of this stuff that's happening. Like, there's a lot of people talking about like the boy crisis and stuff, but they're not really grasping like how absolutely vital it is to address this. They think it's one of multiple, things happening, like effects. And I think that it is one of the core effects. All the other stuff, a lot of it will melt away if we can like solve this problem. And that begins with us seeing men as human and boys as human, and not tools to be used. So, yeah. So and also with Mike, yeah, fuck commies. And that's basically all I got to say about that. But anybody that wants to like, weaponize young men and by leveraging essentially their desire or need to feel like men, which is essentially to do something, useful, to be of service. Yeah, that's exploitative and shitty. So, but
Guarantee
anyway,
you, a lot of these young men that they're exploiting did not grow up with their fathers at
absolutely.
home either.
Yeah, I guarantee you, a large majority is probably the case. A large majority. But
That's what I would suspect.
yeah. So anyway, let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. Did I get any super chats? I gotta check and make sure I didn't miss any super chats or super chows before we move on to the next story. Let me see here. Just a moment. I'm just checking the super chows, because sometimes the Meredith G shows up and she just drops like an absolute spike. There it is, the Meredith G super chow. So Meredith G gives us $5. Thank you, Meredith, and says, HBR News 498, unhappy tax day. Here is some honey for the badgers, which will probably go to better use than the taxes that were just taken out of my bank account this morning. Well, I'm sorry that happened, Meredith. That sucks. And thank you. I got a tax return coming. It's $76. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. but I am getting something, so there's that. All right. That's because we donated a lot. We did a lot of, I think the donations helped. But anyway, let us know what you guys think about.
I'm hoping that The
Yeah,
Republicans make good on Trump's promise to eliminate the income tax. And that would go a long way to stimulate the economy. Right there.
absolutely. I would like that. Yeah. I mean, it seems like a bold move. We'll
When
see.
it's being used for stuff like this,
Yeah, for sure.
obviously there's plenty that's being taken that doesn't need to be taken.
Yeah, for sure. All right. And yeah, this exploitation, Red Devil 13, I think in the vertical chat said, no young person should be tricked into risking their lives in the most horrific ways in war. Yeah, I mean, it obviously happens in that context as well. And I'm glad that men can see that. Like when, we were, I think when it was like, we'd say like a relative peacetime, the military ads were all like lesbian, like cartoons and stuff. Do you remember that? My two
Yep.
mothers took me to protest. And then,
Yeah.
like, Russia invades Ukraine and October 7th happens. And all of a sudden, all of the war commercials are like, white dudes with like square jaws jumping out of helicopters. And I look in the comments of that, and all of them were like, I'm not fighting your fucking wars. Like, so like young men are very much aware of what's going on in that regard. But I think in the case of like when the government is, trying to get you, like when they're starting wars and stuff, I think that's more obvious. But this stuff, like the activism, which we're supposed to believe is grassroots, looking out for the women's and all that, that's harder for people to spot. And that's why I think, and it's funded by the government too. So like it should be identified. But thank you for the comment. All right. But anyway, let's move on to the next story. Now we got a little bit of good news, which I'm happy about. All right. So I'm going to give a quick shout out to Arvis Owens, who has been working very hard to try to change the laws of due process and the way in which, let's say, allegations of sexual assault, rape, sexual misconduct, harassment, etc., are handled in the military. And if you are new to this channel, and you're interested, you should check out our backlog of videos. I have done a series of interviews with many men in the military and their mothers, or at least one is a mother of a man, who have been done really, really raw by the military courts. And it was all based in activism, based in feminist studies, like the one by Mary Koss, which is the one that is basically the real reason for this, okay? And he's been working really hard. He's made a lot of appearances. He's been very diligent, and they're starting to show some results, especially since the switch over to the new administration here in the United States. So I'll go ahead and tell you what this is. On April 13th, 2025, The Intercept reported that the Pentagon is contemplating the elimination of key regulations designed to supposedly combat sexual assault in the military, specifically targeting the Sexual Assault Prevention and Response Program. This program, which supposedly tracks sexual violence and supports victims, is under review by multiple Pentagon offices, including the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness and the Office of the Inspector General. The potential cuts stem from a memorandum obtained by The Intercept, raising concerns among advocates who argue that such a move could violate federal law and deter survivors from reporting assaults, exacerbating systemic issues like the underreporting highlighted in a 2021 investigation of sexual assaults in Africa. The review occurs amidst a broader climate of regulatory rollbacks in 2025, influenced by the Trump administration's push to reduce government oversight as seen in other policy areas. Critics, including advocates for sexual assault prevention, fear a chilling effect on survivors, potentially undoing years of progress in addressing military sexual violence. As of the latest update on April 13th, 2025, the review process is ongoing with no final decision announced, leaving the future of the SAPR program uncertain and prompting calls for vigilance from those concerned about its impact on military personnel. And I will add to this that essentially, in case you don't know, this is essentially the same system that was being used or is being used in college campuses. So if you're a college student and you're a man, most of the time, this applies to men, and a girl makes an allegation against you of sexual assault or rape or something like that, it does not go, even if it goes criminal, the schools handle it on their own terms, usually internally, partly because they're protecting their reputation from a sort of media scandal that may emerge, but also because they just want to get it over with quicker. And what they usually do is they just presume guilt. Like, instead of, the standard of evidence is for something like this is supposed to be beyond a reasonable doubt, but they lower it to a preponderance of evidence, which is extremely easy to get past. The same thing to do in the military, and it is for similar reasons. And so, what they're essentially trying to go to is a standard of, beyond a reasonable doubt instead of preponderance of evidence. And feminists, because those are the people who oppose this, are claiming that this is going to make it to where women don't step forward because they don't step forward enough, which is not true, because there's no way of knowing any of this stuff. And it's actually, for people like Arvis Orens and the people that I've spoken to, this is not just about due process, even though that is the primary factor here, because a man that doesn't get due process because of the military courts, they'll just throw them in jail and destroy their lives, which they have done. I have many interviews with people who have horrifying experiences. But it's also a national security threat, because if you're doing that, then guess what? A lot of men are not going to join the military if that's the risk. And men in the military are telling them they shouldn't if that's the risk, right? So it's getting to the point where our military was made very weak during the Biden administration. And part of it is because of that. And what the reasoning for doing this to begin with is essentially this Mary Koss study that found this crazy statistic that, like, 1 in 4, or in some cases 1 in 3 women, in the military or on college campuses, depending on which one you're looking at, will be raped, in there before they get out. And of course, that is such an overblown statistic based on a false study that essentially, like, stretches the definition of what constitutes a sexual assault and then redefines that as rape. And so what they found is, I forget which one, but there was a politician, a female congresswoman, that put this through, and she said that essentially the number of cases does not come nearly close to what the data that this Mary Koss study claims should be happening. That means, instead of saying, well, that means that the study is wrong, what they're concluding is, no, that means that you're not convicting enough people, because it should be to this level. And so what they're doing is they're convicting more people to try to get closer to that number. So this is the reason. And so now that there's new people in there that want to change that, they're re-examining this. So we don't know if it's going to happen, but Arvis Owen sent this to me, and shout out to him. This looks very, very promising, and I think it's something that we're going to have to follow up on when we learn more. So now that I've said my piece, I'll give you guys the floor.
Yeah,
to understand the wrongness of the cost study, there's a couple of things, like, if you're new to listening to us in the last few years, you may not have heard this. If you've been listening to us for years and years, sorry, you're going to hear stuff that we've talked about before here. But this study was created in the I want to say the late 80s, like 87, somewhere around there, by Mary Koss when she was a professor at Kent State University. That's the Fordette in Ohio University, for history buffs, where the student came out to gawk at the protests and got hit by a stray bullet. And then the media made it out like she was this brave protester that got targeted. But in any case, Koss at this university was part of a movement of feminists that was trying to get higher statistics for rape. Their goal wasn't to find out how frequently it was happening. Their goal was to get statistics they could use to convince the state that it was happening more than we thought. And they openly admitted that at the time. There were articles about it at the time. There were a bunch of articles in the Toledo Blade, a whole series of articles titled Rape, the Making of an Epidemic. And one of the things that was covered in that was the fact that Cost designed her study in such a way that only 1 in 4 of her respondents that she labeled rape victims agreed with her assessment that they had been raped. And something like half of them almost had gone on to have sex again with their alleged rapists.
A lot of them. Yeah, mostly
It
it was
was like
like that did you have sex
43%,
with a guy and
42 or
regret it
43%.
afterwards, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, oh, and it was she had things in there like if you flirt with your boss until he has sex with you and then you get a promotion and your goal was to get that promotion, that even if the woman initiated it, she considered that to be rape. The boss raped the employee, even if the employee seduced the boss to make that happen, right?
Mhm.
If you had a beer before you had sex, you're a rape victim, right? But only if you're female. And the other half of the issue with this was, oh, and by the way, when they found out that only 1 in 4 of her respondents that she labeled rape agreed that they were rape victims, she stopped asking that question.
Yep.
Like, she stopped asking if they agreed with her assessment, right?
Yep.
And she also stopped asking if they had continued to have sex with their alleged rapists afterwards because of they didn't want to know that part, right? But the other thing is that she defined rape to exclude victims of female perpetrators who were male. So, any time someone was
Yes.
forced to penetrate, right? Any
Well, they
time that someone was forcibly enveloped. So the one way that a woman would commit rape against a guy if she was trying to have an experience rather than strictly trying to torture. So the way that would be the most common way a woman would rape a guy, that she excluded from the definition of rape. And she referred to it as other sexual assault. And her literal reasoning behind that she gave, which was stated in another, not a study, but a paper she wrote on the use of these types of surveys to determine the prevalence of rape, was that it's just not the same. That's it. Not why it's just not the same, just that it's not the same to override a man's bodily autonomy as it is to override a woman's bodily autonomy. That it's just somehow for no reason at all, that it's just somehow worse to override the bodily autonomy of a man or a boy than to override the bodily autonomy of a woman or a girl. It just doesn't count. Ollie Ollie income free. And we have seen other studies showing that actually women are much more sexually aggressive than men because that
Yep.
attitude's fairly common, that they don't feel like it's as harmful. They don't feel like it's as a big violation. It's not that big of a deal when a woman or girl violates the bodily autonomy of a man or boy. And the biggest excuse they make, or at least try to make, is, well, you can't get pregnant. No, he can't get pregnant, but he can still get an STI. He can still be traumatized. He can still have his choice taken away in whether or not he's going to remain chaste for his partner. And he can be saddled with 18 years of child support while his rapist raises a child. And as egregious as that is when the victim was an adult, it's even worse when the victim was a child himself. Knowing that
Oh yeah.
your molester is raising your child, and you before you're even old enough to get a job can be forced to pay. That seems to me to be a much bigger deal than getting pregnant, especially given the fact that pregnancy it's over in 9 months if you continue it, but it can be terminated. And women still do have that choice. And they did prior to Roe versus Wade, actually. There were like 200,000 abortions done in the United States prior to Roe versus Wade. So yeah, it's not exactly the way that you think. History is not exactly the way that you think. So the Pentagon considering changing its program to be more friendly toward due process, I think that's a good thing. I think it's very
Absolutely.
important because feminists are basing their claim that evidence against perpetration is shouldn't be allowed, shouldn't be considered on their own results of not considering evidence against well, if we just don't consider evidence against perpetration, you can see that it significantly raises the level of cases that get treated as perpetration. Therefore, we should always think that. We should always consider that evidence to be a problem. No, it actually indicates that that evidence is valid, right? Evidence against perpetration is valid. And the other end of that argument is that if we pay attention and we look at all of the evidence, women are much safer than feminists want us to think. And a lot of men are getting railroaded. And that has to change.
Yeah. Mike?
Yeah, so I guess in summary, it's no more random me tooing in the armed forces. It doesn't
Hope
mean you
not.
can rape people now. It was never legal to rape people in the military. I mean, I'm assuming so. I've never been there, so I can't possibly know. I've never been in the
Damn it,
army,
Mike. I was gonna
so
try to get that
for
in there, but you did it
for all
first.
I
Okay.
know, they never carry guns
How
or
would you
wear
know?
camouflage gear or march in formation or whatever. I've never been there, so I cannot even speculate on what happens there. For all I know, they dress like clowns and have pillow fights and they dance the Macarena while drinking mojitos. And if an expert tells me that that's exactly what they do, in fact, do, well, I have to shut the fuck up and
believe
them.
it. Yeah, of
And
course.
it's irresponsible of us to not have qualified experts on the show to tell us that. But in the
Yeah, I
meantime,
don't know. What are we even doing? We should all quit.
yeah,
We're not. I don't
in the
have
meantime,
a doctorate in English.
yeah, my ignorant, uneducated comedian ass can only assume that this recent change to the rules means that when it comes to the armed forces, crotchety lesbian DEI hires can no longer give the stink eye to a random jarhead and have them court-martialed on nothing but an accusation. Am I warm? Well, that's kind of a shame, actually. Such an orchestrated false accusation would be a very good way for an army private to get discharged and as such avoid having to go and get blown to pieces in Israel for the sake of some bullshit skirmish that has nothing to do with them. Not that this ever happens in Israel, of course. I've never been there, so for all I know, Israel's full of baby unicorns leaping majestically over rainbows and farting strawberry hummus flavored bagels into the atmosphere. I've never been to Ukraine, so as far as I know, all they do is sit around playing Hungry Hungry Hippos while Russian gremlins piss in their eyes for no apparent reason. All right, I'll stop.
Yeah,
I think I've made a point, but it might have been a point about a different thing. I apologize.
Yeah, maybe. I think there's
the modern state of AI produced media, we can never know if any of the photos and video that we are seeing coming out of any of the alleged war zones around the world are real.
Yeah. Well, remember, the Mary Cause study came out of experts. That's the thing that we have
They
to
vomited that
contend
shit up.
with. The whole, all of feminist academia is in fact academia. So when we call it into question and you just say, well, don't talk to the experts, then, you know, it's like, but the experts are lying, so I don't trust experts anymore. And for good reason, the experts told us that we should stay in our homes and socially distance from one another. Like the experts did that.
Wearing
So
face panties would protect you from viruses.
yeah,
Even though viruses can go right through them. It's totally the same as wearing, like an industrial mask
yeah,
to protect from large dust particles, like sawdust and stuff like that. Even though viruses are immensely smaller,
yeah.
significantly
A little
smaller.
bit. They're,
Just like the comparison is like comparing a universe to a planet.
mhm.
Still, we have that total protection. It works every single time.
Yeah. So
Mm.
anyway, in closing, I think this is good news. Again, shout out to Arvis Owens. I see you if you're watching. And thank you for the information. And when you learn more, feel free to share it with us. I am hopeful that this happens. And someone asked, like, but how long will it last? Well, the thing is that it's always going to be under attack. Like
And
there's
it is going to depend on the voters.
yeah,
How long will it last? It depends on whether you go back to trusting the establishment, and that includes the establishment Republicans, or whether
mm-hmm,
you continue to look at populists and outsiders and anybody that comes along that says, this is this is the swamp, this establishment organization, this oligarchy. We have to continue to fight it. This bureaucracy has to go, and
yeah.
so on.
But there will always be something trying to
Feminists
take
always
away
lobby.
your rights. Like it's always happening. And so we have to remain ever vigilant. So no one ever says, oh, it's fixed. We can go home. Like, because we
No.
know in reality, that's just not the way it works. So,
Well,
yeah,
you
I
have to
mean, this
understand how
is
this shit
take
happened
the
in the first
wins,
place,
take the
right?
W, but remain vigilant.
Yeah, you have to understand how this shit happened in the first place. So the first thing that feminists tell you about this type of legislation, whether it's military or not, is that it didn't exist until the last quarter of the 20th century, and that's bullshit, right? Rape being outlawed under legal systems influenced by English common law actually goes back to the 13th century. Rape was illegal in the 1200s, right? And in the 1200s, they actually established an age of consent. The royalty of the time actually established an age of consent. So prior to that, rape was illegal. Prior to that, even rape was
Mm-hmm.
illegal. So it's not something that's brand new. And they didn't call it domestic violence. They didn't call it violence against women and girls. They called it wife beating. Wife beating was illegal going back that far as well.
Yep.
So there's always been national and state or provincial law dealing with this stuff. And in the last quarter of the 20th century, it started to get recognized that this could be done to men as well. And so the United States passed a law called the Family Violence Prevention and Services Act of 1984, and that law was gender neutral. It established the first hotline in the United States for a 24-hour hotline for reporting domestic violence, intimate partner and sexual violence. It established shelters for victims, and it established in law and policy that just because something that would be illegal to do to a stranger happens in between family members in a home, doesn't necessarily make it legal. If it's violent, it's illegal. If it's assault, it's illegal. If it's sexual assault, it's still illegal. And feminists got very upset and began lobbying to gender it immediately. And 10 years later, Joe Biden's Violence Against Women Act was passed and signed, passed by a Democrat and Republican Congress. It was a bipartisan law. It was a bipartisan vote. And then it was signed into law by Bill Clinton. And ever since then, that has been the federal law. It gendered everything. It provided funding for feminist academic fraud disguised as research to quote prove that this is a gendered issue by using faulty definitions. In fact, Mary P. Koss has been involved in that the entire time. The CDC's National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey cites Mary P. Koss as one of its resources. She's the resource for the survey they use, and she's the resource for the definitions they use for different types of sexual violence. And in 2014 or 2016, when I started trying to get information on that research, I found out the researchers didn't even know why they were using those definitions. They didn't even know who they came from.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't know what they were doing. They were completely just tools of the system, just ignorant tools of the system. And so that's basically what you're looking at now is approximately 40 to 50 years of feminist activism, feminist agitation to exclude men and boys from the protection of federal law and state law that addresses intimate partner and sexual violence. It isn't that type of law didn't exist until the last quarter of the 20th century. It's that during the last quarter of the 20th century, we finally started acknowledging that it happened to men too. And feminists went ballistic over that.
Yep. Well, let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. I'm going to move on to the last story, which is another kind of positive one. So yeah, this is, we'll see how it goes. This is a good thing, but it is a long time coming if it begins to change. And this is only one, facet. So I hope that this continues to spread, but I do think there is a vibe shift. And this is something I've talked about for a while. And here is a story that's sort of like related to that. So this isn't like anything massive, but I thought it was kind of nice. That definitely something that the ladies would probably appreciate more. But so Megyn Kelly, like if you guys remember before I know that you guys are going to say she complained about, men not wanting to marry girl bosses, but let's just set that aside for a second and just hear this out. So when Megyn Kelly endorsed Donald Trump for president on the eve of the 2024 election, she delivered a speech at the Trump rally in Pittsburgh, speaking directly to women and tearing down the left's false narratives about Trump. She called him a protector of women. Kelly and Trump have a contentious history, so her endorsement carried a lot of weight. But she also had a message for men in her speech, and that was the bit that I wanted to sort of mention that was more important. For years, the left, the fourth wave feminists, and the gender cult have been demonizing men, labeling anyone toxic who doesn't bend the knee to them completely. Kelly noted that real women, strong women, appreciate men and their masculinity. Now, of course, there's a lot of red flags in this. I get that. I get that when you say fourth wave feminism, I'm like, no, it's just all of it. Let's stop with the recentism of everything. But that's not the important thing. But this morning, this account, Jennifer Say and XXXY Athletics, released an outstanding new advertisement to further symbolize that shift. Not only are men and masculinity not toxic, they are necessary and essential, and they are important. So we're going to play this. So this is the what I mean by the vibe shift. Again, imperfect. I'm not claiming perfect or anything like that. But remember when Gillette put out an ad about masculinity, and then and there were lots of people putting out ads that were shitting on men in one way or another. And then you had the one guy who didn't do that, who developed those watches, right? And I had him on my show. He was selling watches, and he basically made pro father, pro masculine, pro male stuff, or at the very least not attacking men or demonizing them. So it's a step in the right direction. Exactly. So let's listen to this. So this is sort of along the lines of that, but let's take a look at this video. And the fact that they feel like they can make advertising that centers men is actually kind of interesting too. So
This is not toxic, and neither is this, or this, or this.
My 8-year-old daughter knows it's inappropriate, and yet y'all sit there silent.
This is not toxic. This is necessary, and you are not toxic. We think you're essential. You're indispensable to a healthy society, to creating strong families, chivalrous sons, and fearless daughters. So, here's to masculinity. Here's to XY.
all right.
So here's what I'll point out about this. All right.
Mhm.
We already know that the right doesn't get it in terms of only valuing men because of their utility. We already
Yeah.
know that. Right? And we're going to stick a pin in that, underline it. That's a fact. All right. What the men's movement has been dealing with, and just the amount of time that I've been paying attention to it online and everything, and what men have been dealing with as a population for the last 100 years, maybe a little more than 100 years, has been, because the coining of the phrase toxic masculinity to describe the things about masculinity that actually are the reason why men achieve in the world. That goes back to mid 20th century, to a feminist in Australia who had gender dysphoria at the time and eventually transitioned from male to female. Right, but the attitude definitely goes back to early 1800s, and this is refreshing in that there is the courage to step up and say, we do celebrate the things that men do that make them great. And there is the fact that this didn't get quashed.
Mhm.
And those two things are encouraging. So baby steps. Now, if we can get right-wing women to admit that those are not the only great things about men, that as important as it is to celebrate those things, that we don't have the right to obligate men to give them to us, we'll have some huge success. But I'm happy that they're at least acknowledging that the phrase toxic masculinity is shit, and that the toxic masculinity narrative needs to die.
Yes. Mike? Mike? Hello? Are you guys there? Let me just check. Maybe you guys dropped. It's windy
Did you hear
out.
me?
Yeah, I heard you. Yeah, I heard you.
Okay.
Mike is
I
muted
think it's
though.
Mike. Mike might
Yeah.
be muted.
Yeah, he's muted. Yeah, the only thing I was going
Might be
to
AFK.
Yeah, he might be. He might have stepped away for a moment. The only thing I was going to mention is that I think that the thing is, men don't need this kind of stuff. That's why I say this is like more for the ladies, if anything. Like I think that men find the idea of people saying, "Oh, you're a man, you are loved, you are seen, you are, whatever." I think men generally find that to be cringe. Like they're not looking for society to celebrate them for existing. That's why, like, when women get like all of this, I don't know, like they throw little parades for them whenever they do something. Like the women who went up into space, right?
Yeah.
Like,
When they do something that men have been doing since the
yeah,
middle
but
of the last century, yeah.
yeah, exactly. But like in general, if it's something that like men just do, like the reward they get is not from society throwing them a party. The reward they get to them is like just like that the knowledge that the people they care about are taken care of. Like most men, they just do work because they're providing for their families. Like that's the choice they make. And that is the extent of the celebration, right? Like if they do something like amazing and then we recognize that organically, like somebody, does an incredible feat of some kind or an act of courage. Like there is that. But when you're just like, I don't know, this just sounds like a feminine way to put a spotlight on masculinity. And that's fine. Like I'm with you on that. Baby steps. It's fine. It's nice. It's encouraging. I'm glad people are responding positively to it. I'm glad that people are not trying to shut it down or belittle it or dismiss it,
Right.
and they're just
It's
seeing
good
it for what it
to
is.
push
I'm
back
glad that
against
the brand itself wasn't afraid to do it and
Yeah.
recognized it. It's pretty much common sense stuff. I'm glad for all of that stuff. But ultimately, I think that women who support men may get more out of this than men, if that makes sense, from the message itself. Because it's got
Honestly, the women that really need to get something out of this are the women who bought into the whole bullshit toxic
yeah,
masculinity narrative in the first
they
place.
might. Yeah.
It's women who support men already know this stuff, right?
Right,
Women who
right.
support
They
men are
should.
they're already on board with this. We're already on board with the fact that men deserve to be valued and that
Yeah.
it's time to stop shit talking men for
Yeah.
everything
The
and
bare
start
minimum is
going back
for
to
for
thanking them.
their utility. The bare minimum, which is like a lot of that what this is. But yeah,
Right.
I'm with you on that. This is advertising a fitness brand. It's like fitness clothes. It's not political. It's basically like eGuard watches or
Right. But
some other
it is
brand.
good
But
to
yeah,
see a brand, have the courage to step out and say, "You know what? We're not going to push that
for
narrative
sure.
that's been out there trying to shame men. In fact, we're gonna say the opposite and call bullshit on it."
Yeah,
And I
and I'm
think that's
also
really what
glad
this was
that
about.
the ad didn't say anything like, we support strong men and women, like this kind of like we have to put women
Yeah.
in there so that women don't feel hurt or left out. But yeah, I mean, it's, you know, um
Yeah.
yeah, I thought it was good though. So,
Yeah. Strong women don't use the phrase toxic masculinity to describe men. Like,
right.
strong women will describe the phrase toxic masculinity in terms of criticizing the concept. Weak women use the term in all seriousness and unironically because they are weak and they can't compete with men and they don't have any other way to um, interact with men other than to compete with them. And so they come up with that bullshit.
Mhm.
I feel I need to point out, um, some women are strong but still complete cunts. Um, like I don't want to equate women's strength with being basically decent. Like, a great deal of evil people are extremely strong, and women are not exempt from this. This is very often considered a masculine stereotype that when a man is strong, he is able to beat the shit out of people. Well, a woman can be strong and be able to manipulate the shit out of people. It's being nice is not the same as being strong. Being basically decent and respectful is not the same as being strong. There are many very weak women, both physically and psychologically, who are perfectly nice, and they learn to lean on people who are stronger than them, both physically and mentally, and that's fine. A lot of men are weak, and they are able to rely on other people's strengths. That's a good way of coming together. You got to know your weaknesses and know your strengths, and not confuse them with any other personality traits, I think.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And I would say that similarly, there's not complete overlap between strength and aggression, or even between meanness and aggression, right? But there's a lot of people who are aggressive, who are completely weak, and I guess the difference if you're facing off against somebody between strength and weakness can be very starkly revealed when someone does something underhanded, like calling somebody toxic for having strength, as opposed to having real criticisms, or as opposed to just directly facing off against their strengths.
Yeah. All right. Well, any other thoughts on this? I mean, like I said, I think it's nice. Just kind of wholesome, but otherwise, yeah, maybe we'll see more of this. Maybe there is like a vibe shift happening. I don't know. Let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments, and we'll move on. So we're gonna that's the end of the show. So I've gotten through all the stories in a reasonable amount of time. So we're now gonna go into the Patreon show and look at this rage bait. Entitled "Young White Men Do Have Problems, but They Need to Man Up." And if you want to join us for this bonus content, you have to become a Badger yourself by going to feedthebadger.com/subscribe, so that you can watch the additional content. You'll get access to our Discord server, and you'll also get links to watch the videos. They are unlisted unless you are a member, so please consider doing that. $5 a month gets you into the Discord and lets you watch the additional content, and you can give it higher levels for more different kinds of access. But with that said, I want to thank Hannah and Mike for joining me on the show today. I want to thank you guys, of course, for watching. And if you guys like this video, please hit like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, hit the bell for notifications, leave us a comment, let us know what you guys think about what we discussed on the show today, and please, please, please share this video, because sharing is caring. Thank you guys so much for coming on today's episode of HBR News, and we will see you next Tuesday.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.